Welcome to the Encore Audio Archives YouTube channel. I'm Taper Dave, and this is my channel. I've uploaded hundreds of talks here that I've recorded at meetings in West LA, and I've also recorded conventions starting in 2013. I've got a bunch of those up. And Walt and Mary Murray, the original owners of Encore Audio Archives, started the company in the 80s, and Walt recorded Joe and Charlie's and a bunch of stuff down in Vista, California. My sobriety date is June 20th of 1994. I hope you find something you like, so please like and subscribe to my channel and comment down below. If you want to hear something that I don't have or that you don't see, I'll see that I get it. Anyways, take care and have a great day if you want to.
It's a really absolute privilege to introduce my friend Amy T.
I'm Amy, and I'm an alcoholic. My sobriety date is February 25th of 1992, and that's by God's grace and action in this program that I've been able to stay sober one day at a time. Thank you, Randy, for that introduction. I'll have to give you some money later. So I guess, you know, whenever you have a friend for 20 years, you get to see the good, the bad, and the ugly, and I appreciate you leaving out the bad stuff. So, no, I'm just kidding. I want to thank the committee for asking me to come down here, and I've had a great time. There's a lot of nice people here. Mark, I don't know where he is. Where are you, Mark? Are you here? Anyway, he's been very helpful and gracious. There he is. Hello. So I'm here to share my story, and so I'm going to tell you in a general way what it was like, what happened, and what it's like for me today. And, you know, as Randy said, I came in young. I came into Alcoholics Anonymous young, and you know, so I get to reap the benefits of, you know, staying sober through my 20s and my 30s, and hopefully now through my 40s. So we'll see what happens one day at a time. So, but I'm from Oklahoma originally, and born and raised to two great parents. You know, both my parents were really hard workers, and they provided for me everything that I needed. I have a sister that's 4 years younger than me, and I don't normally talk about her that much. I don't know why, but maybe because she lives in Hawaii and she's a stay-at-home mom, and she just does boot camp and goes to the beach for life. She's on a staycation. No, I'm just kidding. But anyway, so no resentment there. But no, I have a sister. She's 4 years younger than me, and we grew up. My parents divorced when I was 5, so my sister was a year old, and we lived with my mom most of the time. And, you know, I mean, I can't tell you that anything horrendous happened. I think that was probably the most traumatic thing up until that point in my life that had ever happened, was my parents separating, because I didn't understand what happened. But you know, my dad mailed child support every month, and he picked us up every other weekend till I was 18 years old. So, you know, I mean, he did what he was supposed to do, and he was a great dad, is a great dad. So, and I say that because, you know, I am a counselor, because I'm a glutton for punishment, and you know, I hear a lot of stuff from a lot of people, and I work with a lot of child welfare cases where parents have had their kids removed from the home. So I hear a lot of stuff, and I just think, you know, I had it so good growing up. You know, my family wasn't rich. But we had everything that we needed, and I got a lot of what I wanted to. And so, you know, I would say that I was a pretty fortunate kid on the outside. Now, on the inside, I got dealt a different hand, and I don't know where that came from, but because I always felt like nothing was ever good enough, and I always felt like there was something wrong with me, and I never knew when to laugh, or, you know, I never knew how to have fun, and I never was able to feel those excited feelings that I saw other people experiencing, and so I always just thought that there was something wrong with me. Now, I equated that to I didn't have the nice things that some of the people that I went to school with had. And so, you know, I became very resourceful at an early age, and I just started taking those things that other people had because I thought, you know, if I had nice things, then I would feel better about myself. And so, you know, I mean, I love telling the story about whenever handheld video games came out, they were like this big, and so I stole one when I was in 3rd grade from one of the kids that was in my class, and I got caught. I mean, and I had like really worked this out well. I had a tote bag, I put it on, I put my coat over it, you know, walking out, and I was planning on taking this on a trip that my mom and I were going on, and I got busted walking out the door, and the whole class knew that that I had stolen this, and I got in trouble, you know, and I had to bake him cookies and tell him I'm sorry and all that. But, you know, the real punishment for me was everybody knowing like what had happened. And so, and that's kind of, you know, paints a picture of how I lived my life. You know, I did things that people would find out about, and I would be ashamed of them. And I just, I needed a drink really young. So we'll get to that. My first drink that I had enough alcohol in my body to change the way I felt was when I was like 12 or 13 years old, and I was spending the night with my cousin, and she had a bunch of wine coolers. Now, I'd tasted alcohol in the past. My mom had gin on her fridge. It had like dust all over it, and because that's how she drank. And but wine coolers, they tasted pretty good. And so I drank 7 one night, and I got enough alcohol in my body to feel that feeling that I saw you guys experience, and I saw everybody on the outside experience that I had never felt. And I felt like, you know, this is it. You know, I mean, when I had that feeling kick in, I was sold on drinking. I mean, that was my destiny from that point forward. So I drank 7 wine coolers that night. I begged my cousin to go back to the store for more because I thought, if 7 makes me feel this good, I want more. And you know, and that's how I drank. That's how I drank the whole time I drank. And you know, it wasn't for a really long time, like 5 years. But in 5 years, I accomplished a lot. And in 5 years, you know, that's where the damage came in my life. The damage came from me and the decisions that I made. Because, you know, immediately after that night, I started stashing alcohol because my mom would keep beer in the fridge, and she would buy like Little Kings, and I would take one and stick it under my bed in a shoebox, and I would just wait until I had enough stashed, and then I would drink because I didn't want to just drink one. And I was never a just one drinker. I see some heads nodding. Some people, you know, wanted to have one, but I started from the beginning. Like you know, all or nothing for me. And so I would save up enough, and I would sneak out my window and go hang out with people. I would do any chemical that was brought my way, and I never asked what it was going to do to me or anything like that. And I liked some drugs and some I didn't, but I can tell you that alcohol was my best friend. And so, you know, it was my constant. So I started lying, and I had a very close relationship with my mother until I drank. I used to talk to her about everything up until that point, and then I just started lying about everything. And what, you know, I started hanging out with people that were doing what I wanted to do, and I thought life had like just switched on. Like I was having fun now, and so I quit hanging out with the people that I was hanging out with, my friends, and you know, went to hang out with the partiers. You know, the second time I drank, I split a liter of Everclear with a friend of mine. I stood outside of a liquor store with a $20 bill and asked the guy that was going in, you know, as he was going in, or asked people as they were going in if they would get me a drink. And finally somebody said yes. I was, you know, 12 or 13 years old, and I handed him that 20, and I said, I want the biggest, strongest thing they have. And he brought me a liter of Everclear, and we walked over to the grocery store and bought a gallon of grape juice. And so we had a pink night, and I experienced several things that night that I had not experienced before, one being a blackout and the other being the dry heaves. When I got home that night, my mom thought I was going to die from alcohol poisoning. She said my lips were whiter than my face. And, I learned a valuable lesson that night, and that was, that I didn't mix well with Everclear, and I didn't wake up that next morning with the thinking, like a normal person would think, like, oh my God, I'm never drinking again. And my thought was, I am never drinking Everclear again in my life. And so, the wine cooler night, not that same experience. And so, but that's how I drank, that's how I paint the picture when I tell my story. Like, that's what happened. And it went from I was playing sports in school to they started drug testing. So, sports really not that important anymore. And I was fortunate enough to be able to have some really cool jobs whenever I was a teenager. And my dad, he had a lot of connections in Tulsa. And so one year I got a job at one of the public pools, and I loved this job because I was in charge of the cash box, or the money. And those were the best jobs for someone like me, because I would say one for you, one for me. And pretty much just split the money with the cash box every day. And so, I was always able to figure out some way to get my money to drink or to take what I needed. And I don't know why I'm thinking of this story, but one time I walked into a convenience store, and, I'm the type of person that would take your purse in the bathroom if you leave it, to where you can see it. Or in the convenience store, I would go in the back and see if they had any, alcohol stashed around, which they never did, but I always checked. And so I'm back in the back room of this convenience store one time, and the guy comes back there and like, "What are you doing?" And I was like, "I'm looking for the bathroom," And I always had a quick answer for everything. And so he's like, "You're trying to steal something," and I'm like, "No, I'm not." And so he really made me mad. So on the way out, they used to have those cigarette racks on the counter. I grabbed the whole rack of cigarettes as I was leaving, because he was in the back trying to figure out what I stole. And I took it to my car and I dumped it in there. And my boyfriend at the time was sitting in there, and he's like, "What are you doing?" And I was like, "He said I was trying to steal something." And so, but that's just kind of, how my brain worked. I was quick and in and out, and just selfish to the extreme, just getting what I want. It didn't matter, who I was taking from. I destroyed my parents, and I destroyed their trust. And it got to a point where they just were like, don't even come around anymore. They changed the locks on their house. Don't call, don't write anything. Because if it wasn't me that was stealing from them or harming them, it was the people that I was around. And because those are the type of people that I hung out with, because they were doing the same things that I was doing. And so I got caught stealing at a department store in Tulsa when I was 17, and my parents decided to send me to treatment. And I was really excited about going to treatment, and not because I thought I had a problem. It was just because I thought that was cool, because I had a friend that went to rehab, and so and she didn't stay sober when she got back, but I just thought that's so cool. Like, she got to go away for 30 days and come back, and so I wanted to have that experience too. I wanted to be able to tell people that, because it was about image, right? So anyway, so I went to treatment. My parents they paid for me to go to treatment, and it was awesome. I had a blast there. We played volleyball, and it's nothing like, it was a private place. Not, it was no helicopter rides and horseback riding, but we had volleyball and you know, it was nice, a family week, and my mom and my sister came down and talked about how I hurt them, and you know, it was really an awesome experience for me. I can say that today because you know, for the first time in my life, I identified, and that's, you know, one of the things that was, I guess, you know, my parents could have saved several $1,000s, but, you know, I connected with people on that level, you know, on that level that we have, that language of the heart that Bill W. talks about that we have. And I identified as an alcoholic. I knew that I had a problem, and I knew that, you know, those were my people. You know, I knew I was around people that understood me, and I had never been in that situation before. And so when I left treatment, I was scared. I was scared that I was going to get drunk. And so it was awesome. And I left there, and I actually, my family paid for me to go to a halfway house in Oklahoma City, which I always forget about that little stint that I did there. But I got in trouble like immediately for fraternizing with this guy, and because that's what, you know, that's what we do. And so they put me on room restriction or something retarded. And so I snuck out of my room in the middle of the night and like broke into the office and called my dad from their phone, because we didn't have cell phones back then. But, you know, and I was like underneath the desk calling my dad, like, they're being so mean to me here. So he came and picked me up the next day. And I mean, he totally clueless. He was totally clueless. And so I moved in with some family members, and I stayed sober for 3 months like this. And I was a junior in high school, and I didn't take any of the suggestions that were given to me. And they gave me like the same suggestions I would hear in an AA meeting. You know, they told me to read the literature, to attend meetings, to get a sponsor, to pray. Well, I did pray. That's the only thing that I did, and I didn't drink. And but what I didn't get was the fact that, you know, because I mean, I really thought, well, if I just don't drink, then everything's going to be better. And I think that's like an illusion that we all, or most of us, come to Alcoholics Anonymous with, is that it's just about putting down the drink. And as long as I don't drink, then, you know, I'm good. But, you know, I forget that I have this crazy thing up here, and or I didn't know. And so, so it took about 3 months at that time of me just, you know, not being around alcohol. I was kind of thrust into a church situation, which was pretty cool. I mean, there were some really nice kids in there, but that's kind of how my insanity of my disease attacked me, was through those relationships, because, you know, I'm like 17 years old, and, you know, hanging out with kids my age that, you know, have never drank, smoked a cigarette in their life. And so, you know, so my mind started playing on me in that way. Like, oh, Amy, you know that you've done things that these people will never do. And I just separated myself from them, and like, what do I need to do now? Well, I need to call the people that I relate to, that know where I'm coming from. And so I called my old drinking buddies, and, you know, I mean, it was just immediate. But I mean, my intention was not to drink. I went there, you know, and I like went, well, actually, this is what happened. There was this guy that I kind of had a crush on, that I was a drinking buddy of mine, and my uncle died, and I wasn't close to him. So I invited this guy to go to the funeral with me, because that's what you do when you're 17, right? And I told him I would buy him a case of beer if he would go with me. So I had no intention of drinking. And so, you know, we get the case of beer. He gets in the car. He asked me if I want one. I said no. And I said, well, maybe, you know. So I take it, and I sit it between my legs. It's popped open. And I just sit there like, I don't know. Should I? Yes, no, yes, no, yes. And so, I mean, that was how it happened. And so, but I drank for 16 months after that. And that's whenever I can tell you that I experienced what it's like to live in hell. Because I told you, my parents don't want to have anything to do with me, and neither do any of my decent friends that I've had in my life, because they're tired of me, you know, stabbing them in the back, stealing from them, you know, doing them wrong. I mean, I would go to my best friends' houses and rummage through their cars in the middle of the night while they were asleep, just to see, you know, if there was something in there that I could steal that was worth money. And like one time I got into the trunk of my friend's car and she had like all these big boxes and I stole all of them. And so, you know, I get home and I open them up and they're those big yellow trash bags. I mean, I stole like 10 boxes of trash bags from my friend, so score, right? I don't know what I thought they were, VCRs or something. I mean, like, thought I hit the jackpot. So that's just the kind of friend I am. So I, you know, I'm homeless. I actually, I dropped out of school the second semester of my junior year because it was just getting in the way of my drinking. And I'm sorry. It's okay, Charlie. So I dropped out of school because it just was getting in the way of, you know, what I was doing, and that's whenever things really got worse for me, and I started hanging out with older people and people that had dropped out of school too, and so we got really heavy into, like, you know, doing crime related stuff, and I just got angry, and I mean, we would drive by and I would tell my friend to stop and I would get out and just like beat somebody up, you know, just for looking at me, and I just, you know, I just was so angry, and I hated the world, and I was getting in fights all the time, and it was just awful, mostly fighting guys, and I'm surprised I didn't get killed back then, but because I just would jump on people, and I would go to bars and stuff, and I wasn't even old enough to get in, but you know how we are, like, we figure out a way to make that happen whenever it's, you know, if my drinking is on the line, I'm going to figure out some way to make it happen. And so, you know, I went to a club one night. I borrowed a friend's car, and I went to a club one night with a girl that was like the big cocaine dealer's girlfriend. And I remember walking into the club and like grabbing my drink, and I turned, and that's all I remember until I woke up on impact in the car. And, you know, it was several hours later, and I had hit a fire hydrant in the parking lot of the club that we were at, and the girl in the passenger seat was pretty injured, and I wasn't. And, you know, all I could think was, I got to get her home so I can get back before last call, and so I drive this car like several miles down the road, probably like 6 or 7 miles, and I drop her off, and I'm trying to get back, and the car breaks down where I can't even drive it anymore. And so I just walk back to the club, and you know, that night I found the man of my dreams and brought him home with me, and I was living with my girlfriend, who was a stripper at the time. And I loved living with her because she always brought home like $200 or $300 a night, and it was so easy for me to get $20 from her. And all I needed was $10 a day to get my drink on back then, because I don't know how much it costs to drink now, but I could get a fifth back then for $10, and maybe a sandwich too. So, but so we get back to her house, me and my new boyfriend, and I've totaled this car of hers, and it was a rental car because I had totaled her other car that she had, and actually wasn't totaled. It got stolen from me by some crazy people that busted a bottle over my head that I had picked up. I mean, you know, because I would just get in the car with anybody, and somebody busted a bottle over my head and took the car, and I was so mad that the bottle was, you know, I couldn't drink it. And I humiliated my mother in the emergency room that night because I was, you know, my mom just walked out the door and said, take her to jail. And so, you know, so this is me drinking, and I, you know, I mean, this was the beginning of the end for me, because I met this guy, and he was, I guess he was involved in a lot of stuff that I didn't really know about, and we had a very enmeshed relationship, like from the first 10 minutes we met. And so, I mean, I was with him every day for like the next 3 months, and I couldn't even go to the bathroom by myself. And we fought, and I was a violent drinker, and he was like 6'4", and weighed 240 pounds, and just a big guy, and so, we would fight, and I would always get whipped. Of course, I always started the fights, and I decided I've got to quit drinking, and I went to treatment again. And I didn't know it was a halfway house, and so like right whenever we got there, they were like, okay, you need to go get a job. And I was like, a job? Well, I checked in with another girl at the same time, so we went out to get a job together. And so we were driving down the road, or she's driving me down the road, and she just asked me if I knew where to get her some dope. And I said, yeah, but can we stop by the liquor store first? And so, I mean, I had like managed to put together 24 hours sober. And so we stopped at the liquor store. I walked in and bought a bottle of liquor, and I'll never forget that day because it was like the last time that I really, the last time I really, really, really tied one on. And she had, I remember buying this bottle, and it was plastic. It was a plastic fifth. The first time I'd ever had one. That was in January of 1992. And I took her to my boyfriend. He got her what she was looking for. She ended up owing him some money out of the deal, and he basically said, you're going to make my money back. And so we took her to where the prostitutes hang out, and she got in this little red car, came back about 20 minutes later, and she handed him the money. And I thought, wow, that's really cool. And so so we started hanging out over here in that area, and I was drinking one night, and we were trying to figure out how to get some money, and I saw that little red car drive by, and I told my boyfriend, I said, hey, I'm going to go pull this guy over. I'm going to bring him to you, and you take his money. And he thought, that's a great idea. And so so I walked out to the corner, the car pulled up, I got in the car, made up some really interesting stuff to tell the guy. I took him to where my boyfriend was, and whenever he walked around the corner, my boyfriend came out with a 2x4 and hit him in the head. And so the guy fell down. We took his wallet, and he had a big diamond ring on, and we left. Or he got up and left, and so I was like, that was awesome, And so we went to the pawn shop and pawned his ring, and they were like, we'll give you $300 for it. And I'm like, oh, okay, yeah, we'll take it. And he had $300 in his wallet, so it was like a score. And, I hadn't eaten in a while, so we went and ate. I remember we went and ate a sandwich, and we went through that money pretty fast, and so we did that again. And, we kept robbing people like that for a while, and the first time it was on January 3rd, and the last time we did it was on January 21st. And I remember I walked out to the corner, and I prayed because I felt so stuck where I was, and I just knew that what I was doing was not right, but I couldn't get out of it. And it was just like a really powerless feeling that, I had the good angel sitting on this shoulder, and it was just like a whisper. And then, my alcoholism was just screaming on the other end. And so I prayed to go to jail, and you know what? Prayer works. And I actually that night I picked up an old man in a truck, and I took him to an abandoned house, and my boyfriend hit him in the head with a baseball bat. And he didn't fall down, and so my boyfriend hit him again, and he just kind of slinked down the wall, and I was freaking out because I knew that this was a bad situation, like worse than any we had been in, and I thought for sure that the guy was going to die. And so we took his wallet and his $23, and we left, and he didn't leave. my boyfriend ended up taking him like an hour or two later to the hospital supposedly, but come to find out he just took him down the street and locked him in his truck. Well, they found him walking down the road in the middle of the night that night. He was covered in blood. They took him to the hospital. He had a very traumatic brain injury, and or a couple. And I remember I woke up and it was on the news that morning. They were looking for the suspects, and I was like, oh my God, like they're talking about me. And so I ended up going to jail. They came over, they were interrogating. The neighborhood we were hanging out in, it didn't take long for them to figure out who it was. And so I ended up going to jail, not because of that crime, but because I had a bench warrant for a speeding ticket that I hadn't paid. And, that's also a very common denominator with alcoholics, I think, is that, we have more important things to do than pay our tickets, And so I went to jail, and I called my mom that day, and I don't know when the last time I talked to her was, but when I called her, all I said to her was, Mom, if that guy dies, I'm going to prison for the rest of my life. Like, that was what I said to my mother. And she and her best friend came up, and they were like, don't say anything. We'll be right there. We'll get you an attorney. And, they started calling around. It was, like, ridiculous how much it was going to cost for an attorney for a homicide. I was in the, so, my mom couldn't afford an attorney. And so I got a public defender. I went to jail. I was there for 85 days. And I ended up taking a plea bargain for an armed robbery charge. And the reason why it ended up being an armed robbery charge was because 85 days after I went to jail, that man was still in the hospital, and he hadn't died. And so they couldn't say that it was homicide. So anyway, so I left, and I went to prison. I turned 19 2 days before I got sentenced. And I went to a minimum security yard in Oklahoma. And right when I got there, I don't know why, but I saw the case manager, and they told me that there was meetings there. And I remembered, like, hey, meetings. And I remember going and listening to the people that would drive there. They drove for like 45 minutes to come and talk about themselves, and I loved it. I loved that they did that, and I appreciated the fact that they would drive all that way to come spend an hour with us, and I listened to them, and over time I started getting a little bit of hope for myself, because where I was at that point in time was I believed that if there was a God, that he sure as hell did not want to have anything to do with me because of the way I had chosen to live my life up to that point. Something happened to me the day that I was in the police car, and, I know a lot of people have experiences like this in Alcoholics Anonymous, but I feel like, looking back on it, it was almost as if I was just plucked out of the situation that I was in and placed somewhere else. And, a lot of my insides changed at that moment too. Not completely, not that I didn't have anything to work on, not that I still don't, but, something happened to me that day. And, I became willing to try something different. And so that's what I did. I went to meetings. I went to, both fellowships for a while because they had one each a week, and that's what I got. I was at that place for 6 months. In that time, I went to Votech for horticulture. They made me go to school because I was under 21 and I didn't graduate from a high school. And I also got my GED while I was there. And so from that point, I went to another place. And I worked in the laundry at nights, and I went to meetings, and I was able to go to some outside meetings. There was a lady there that would come pick us up and take us to meetings. And during that whole time, I didn't work a step. I didn't have a sponsor, but I loved Alcoholics Anonymous, and I loved you people so much because I knew that there was something here, something that had happened to you that I wanted to happen to me. And I believed that. So over time, I developed I developed a lot of hope. And so I would go to meetings, and then eventually the Department of Corrections in Oklahoma sent me to treatment. And I was able to obtain a sponsor at that time. And the speaker last night from Boston, he said that, they suggested that you get a sponsor that has something that you want. And it's like, for a newcomer, that's such a funny thing to say, because it's like, I didn't know what I wanted. So I picked a lady that had a Mercedes and a nice house, and I knew nothing about this woman, but she was, she presented nicely, and so that's who I picked. And just, I knew that things had changed for me, because I went to her house. She picked me up to go work the steps, and I could tell she was scared of me. And so I knew that she was not the one for me. I knew that, and so, because I knew that if I wanted to, I could totally take advantage of her, and I don't know what I could have got out of the deal, but I could have got something. So I knew that I needed to find somebody else, and so I found this woman named Priscilla, and she was a big, tall lady that went to the meeting, and she was a nurse, and I always wanted to be a nurse when I was younger. And she talked about drinking wine coolers by the pool, and so I thought, well, maybe that's who I need to get. And I walked up to Priscilla after a meeting at the Class and Club in Oklahoma City, and I asked her if she would sponsor me, and I told her I was in treatment, and she writes down her number, and she says, well, I'll give you my number, but no one from treatment's ever called me before. And so, that is exactly exactly what I needed to hear, because you know what I did every day, picking up the phone and calling her, and she saved my life. And I've had so many angels in Alcoholics Anonymous that saved my life, and I always tell people, you don't know who you're going to meet today that's going to change your life forever, and it's so true, and especially in these rooms. I got to give my sponsor her 25-year chip on Thursday night, and she got sober when she was 19, and so she's just a couple years older than me, and she's on this path before me, and I appreciate that. I appreciate when the women stick around, and I was thinking about that. I'm so glad that I have all these guy friends that live in Houston, but it seems like the women don't stick around as much as the men do, and so and I can see how that happens, because I have a child. But anyway, I'm getting off on my tangent. So I started working steps with Priscilla, and we went to a lot of meetings, and I got fat because we would go out to eat all the time, and it seemed like food was a lot cheaper back then than it is now. It's like I'm always like, I'm eating at home tonight, it's too expensive. So, but yeah, we went out to eat all the time, and just, I don't know. I started to learn how to have fun, and slowly learned how to have connections with people, because, like I said before, my relationships consisted of, do you have something that I want? If not, bye. I don't have any time for you. And I was on a mission. And so, I ended up moving back to Tulsa when I had about 4 years sober, and that's whenever I met Randy and Michael and Charlie, and I got involved. I got involved in the young people stuff, and oh my gosh, that's like when things really launched for me in my sobriety. And I always tell people, I didn't really feel better in sobriety till I was 6 years sober. And I hate telling people that. They're like, when is it going to get better? I'm like, I don't know. It's different for everyone. But for me, it was about 6 years. And it was I just realized all of a sudden one day, oh my God, But I started learning how to have fun. And we used to travel in this pack of people. And it was all these young kids. And some of them are dead today. And, some of them aren't sober. But, we would go to a meeting one night, and there was every night of the week we had a meeting that we would go to, and then afterwards we would go to this killer coffee place called Gold Coast, and they had coffee shakes with ice cream and coffee grinds in them, and then we would go play pool, and it was just so much fun. And then we would like travel to Iquipa and go to Washington, D.C. or Colorado, and it was just, we had so much fun. And that's whenever I got like some kind of zest for life and realized like, okay, it's not all down in the dumps, depressing, but it takes you people to inspire that in me, because of myself, that doesn't come naturally for me. And so I have to be around you guys. And I'm so grateful for that, because it forces me to get out of the house. I mean, of my own, I will stay at home, probably in my bed, pull the covers over my head, But whenever I get out with you guys, it's like plugging into my source. And so, I wouldn't say that Alcoholics Anonymous is my higher power, but it is definitely a power greater than myself that inspires me. And so, I've been able to do a lot of amazing things in sobriety that people like me normally don't get to do. I went to prison for robbery. I was a American Express representative at a travel agency in Tulsa, and I was in charge of like $500,000 in blank traveler's checks. Like, that just does not happen to people like me. And so, and I remember like arguing with my boss whenever he's trying to get me to do that. I was like, you don't understand. Like, I can't do this. And he's like, yes, you can, just do it. And I mean, of course, I would have gotten in a lot of trouble if I would have taken advantage of that. But God, it was so tempting. It really was. But I didn't have to do it. I didn't have to take the money. And so, but I also had the opportunity to go back to school. And whenever I started going to college early on in my sobriety, and I attribute it today to low that I didn't complete it right away. So I took about a 10-year break, and which was great because I got to do a lot of fun things, and I've been able to travel a lot. I'd never even been on a plane before until I got sober. My first flight ever was out of the JENKS airport, which is where I live. It was in like a 5 or 6 seater Cessna, and we flew to Joplin, Missouri to go to an AA conference. That was my first flight. Now, today, I would never get on one of those planes ever again, but that was my first flight ever. I went back to college. I moved to New York for a while, and I don't know if you've ever been there, but that's my favorite place in the world. It like totally inspired me to, I mean, there's just so much energy there, and people are, competitive, and you just, I don't know, I just felt it. So I was like, I don't want to sit behind a desk my whole life. I want to do something with myself. And so I explored my options around there, and I couldn't afford to go to college and live there. And so I moved back to Oklahoma, and I started working on my degree. Well, whenever I applied for college, they started asking, which they didn't ask early on whenever I was going, but they started asking if you've ever been convicted of a felony on your college application. And I didn't think it was very funny, but so I was like, what I always do, I always check yes, will explain an interview or whatever. And so I got a packet back, and I had to fill out all this stuff to go to college. And I was upset about it. I was like 10 years sober, and like, why is this happening to me? But I did it. I walked through the process, and a lot of that is just how it's been for me. It's like, I have a felony, I have a violent felony. It's a process, everything's a process. You got to walk through the process. And so I ended up having to do an interview with the board of deans, and I had to send letters, and I ended up going through that interview, and it sucked. But I was honest with them. I was honest with them about what happened, where I was at, what I'm doing today, and they accepted me into the college. And whenever I got home that day from the interview, one of my friends called me that had written a letter. And he said, what happened, And I explained to him what happened and everything. And he said, well, you never told me what you did. And I was like, okay. I just thought that was weird because he wasn't in the program. He was just a partner of a friend of mine. And I told him what I did. And he goes, wow. He said, that happened to my best friend from high school. And so he starts telling me the story about his friend telling him about how his how he had a little red car and how his ring got stolen and his wallet. And I was like, okay. Because I had been telling this story for a long time at that point in my life, and I really knew that this was going to happen at some point in my life. But, this is like one of those things that makes me know that God is in charge, not me. And because I figured it would be, after a meeting like this, somebody would come up to me and say, I was one of those people, you know what I mean? But it hasn't happened that way. It happened from my friend Michael, that is an attorney, that, his best friend from high school told one person ever what actually happened that night. And it just happened to be my friend Michael that I met, years later. And so, coinky dink? I don't think so. So he's like, what are you going to do? And I was like, well, I know what I need to do, but I got to make a phone call first. So I called my sponsor, and after lots of oh my gods, she said, okay, I want you to pray about it. And I said, okay. So then I'm talking to her the next day, and she said, okay, what are you going to do about it? And I was like, well, I'm praying about it. And she's like, no. So I said, well, what I thought I would do was ask my friend Michael to be a mediator between myself and the guy, because I'm not just going to approach him out of the blue. So I called Michael, asked him if he would do it. He said, sure, and he calls him, and 5 minutes later he calls me back. Yep, he'll talk to you. So I got to make amends to this guy, and it started on the phone with a long conversation. And I can tell you that was one of the scariest things up until that point in my life that I had ever done. But my experience in Alcoholics Anonymous have given me something called faith. That hope that I had in the beginning over the years has turned into something called faith. And so I knew that no matter what happened, that I was going to be okay in that situation. Didn't make me want to do it anymore, but I knew that I had to. And, I like to imagine the scales of justice, especially when it comes to my amends, because I have pride and ego, believe it or not. And so, I don't want to do that stuff all the time, but I have to remember that I'm not trying to save my face in these situations, And so, so I called that guy, and we had a long conversation, and he had a lot of questions for me, and mostly because he says, Amy, he said, you've stopped doing what you were doing 11 years ago, but I haven't. And so he was still out picking up prostitutes and doing that whole thing, and so he wanted to talk to me about God whenever I was trying to make amends to him, and it was really turned out to be a really cool, like, full circle thing, and I'm not in contact with him anymore, but I know that, we kept in contact for a while, and it's just amazing the way God works in our lives, and I think that I was given that experience to share with people, because it was such an amazing thing. And it's like I believe that happens in all of our lives, but we just don't get to see it all the time. We don't get to see it that clearly. And so I've been able to make amends to I've been able to become friends with the homicide detective in my case. She wrote a letter for me whenever I applied for a pardon that was so quickly shut down. No. I had, and that guy that we robbed wrote a letter for me to get a pardon. And so, it's just amazing the way things can change for us if we're willing to do things a little bit differently. But life for me today is a lot different than it was 5 years ago, because I have a son. And, I met a guy in AA, and we fell in love very quickly, and which is not my personality at all. If you know me, that is not my personality at all. But I was pregnant within 3 months of dating this guy, and that's like unheard of in my family. Like, that's a no-no. You don't do that. You don't get pregnant and you're not married, and But, I was having such a great time with this guy, and I always wanted to have a kid. So at 35, 16 years sober, 35 years old, I had a baby. And I was so excited about it because I didn't think that I could have kids. And he got drunk. My son's dad got drunk, and he's still out there. And so, he struggled around for a few months, and then it was just a decision that we made, like, okay, it's time for you to move out and try to do this on your own, because I can't live with, the fear and the money coming out of the bank account, and all that stuff. And so we decided together that it would be a good idea for him to leave temporarily, and he unfortunately has not been able to get it back together completely. So I've been raising this little boy for the last 3 years by myself, and it's always whenever I start crying. If there's any single moms in here, I totally have the utmost respect for you, because it's such a challenge to do that on your own. And I was watching this comedian clip on YouTube yesterday. It was like, people that don't have kids, they don't know what it's like to have kids. And so it was so hilarious. But it's like, and I think whenever I talk about it, it seems like I'm not grateful for my little guy, and I am. I mean, he is the most amazing person. I mean, he has taught me how to love unconditionally. I mean, I get up in the morning and he can do something that makes me so mad, but I mean, I feel it like to my bones, like how much I love him. And, and that may change over time. I don't know. But, it's like, no matter what he does, I just feel like, oh, I love him so much. And it's such an incredible experience for me, because like I said, I went through 35 years of my life just being completely self-centered. And I thought I was working on my selfishness, but so that's my life today. Is like, I have to do AA around my life today, and it's frustrating, because I love being on conference committees and doing all that stuff. And I know that it's it's in the future, but I don't want to rush this precious time that I have right now with him. So, I don't get to go to my home group every time the doors open, but I have to be in recovery. I have to engage in recovery. And sometimes that's done in other ways. And sometimes that's done in, picking up the phone and calling my sponsor, or picking up the phone when my girls call me, my sponsees call me, and, and finding time. I'm gonna have to squeeze in a meeting over here. I don't know anybody there, but, this is my life. I love Alcoholics Anonymous. Alcoholics Anonymous has given me the most blessed life ever. And, that doesn't mean I'm skipping in the tulips all the time, because I'm not. I can be very angry and hostile sometimes, but, I love my life, and I figure I've lived about half of my life, and I'm so grateful, because I get to look forward to what's to come in my life. And, I have no idea what it is, but I'm excited about it. And I used to not even have the capacity to think like that, because I was such a negative person when I got sober. I remember my first boyfriend in sobriety said, "You are the most negative person I have ever met in my life." And I thought, what? I didn't even get it. And I was really negative. So, I'm grateful for the fact that, I've worked through the steps. I've done things that I didn't necessarily want to do, just because I knew that I needed to do them. And, a lot of times that's what this program is about. It's just about, doing something different, because I don't always have the best ideas. And, running my thoughts by somebody else, running my actions by somebody else before I do them, not, blowing through my life on self-will, because, I explained to you where self-will got me. So, I'm really grateful to be here this weekend, and thank you for allowing me to tell my story.
I think we got a great talk going on here. Thanks for watching the channel. Taper Dave here. Just curious, do you think this is better than Zoom? Okay, this is how I prepare my drone for launching. I like to do it inside the cab of my truck so I'm not standing outside in the weather. To install the joysticks for control, up and down, right and left, powered on. I have an Android phone that I use to connect it to the drone with. And it's actually controlled through the iPhone, through an app. Oops, wrong way. It's actually controlled through the iPhone, or through this Android phone, through the app. It's actually controlled through the Android phone, through an app, and you connect it through this short connection right here.
Remote control connected.
Remote control's connected. So I pull out the drone. I have to extend the legs. Long legs extended first, then the short legs. Remove the gimbal protector. Set that aside, then power it on one short burst and one long burst. I lay it down. So I have to go to calibrate. So the drone's not connected yet. It shows you here as this drone gets disconnected, even though the remote's powered on. So the drone has to establish it's connected. So I go into the app to calibration mode. First I'll calibrate the remote controller. Start calibration. Out, in, oop, out, in, up, down, and then this little wheel is to control the gimbal. So it's calibrated. Go to gimbal calibration, start calibration, and then it calibrates the gimbal. I don't know if that shows up. The gimbal's moving all over the place. Changes, you can see it on the video. And I'm calibrated to take off. It's acquired 7 satellites at the moment. There are 26 satellites up in the sky, which it has to acquire before you can take off. So it's connected. It's got enough satellites. This is white. I can go to press this little arrow button, swipe right to take off, and it would start the motors if I slid this to the right, but I'll wait till I get outside. Don't want to do it inside.